There is a path that runs through the center of your neighborhood, and you have walked it so many times that your feet know the small dip near the second lamppost, the place where tree roots have lifted the pavement just slightly. You do not think about this path when you walk it. Your body simply moves, adjusting to the terrain it knows. And yet, if someone asked you to describe this path in detail, you might find yourself pausing, uncertain, realizing how much you walk without truly seeing. The fourth noble truth speaks of a path like this. Not a path you must search for in distant mountains or hidden temples, but one that runs through the center of your ordinary life, waiting to be walked with full attention. The Buddha called it the Noble Eightfold Path, and he offered it as the way between extremes, the middle way that leads to the end of suffering. You might notice, if you sit quietly for a moment, how often your mind swings between two poles. There is the voice that says you must push harder, achieve more, become someone different than who you are right now. And there is the voice that says, none of it matters, why bother, let everything slide into comfort and distraction. Between these two, your days unfold, between striving and collapsing, between gripping and going numb. The path the Buddha described does not live at either extreme. It runs between them, like that neighborhood path runs between the houses on either side. It is not the middle in the sense of compromise, not a weak halfway point between two strong positions. It is something else entirely. It is the place where you can actually walk. You can feel this in your body right now if you bring your attention to your breath. Notice how the breath comes in, and there might be a small urge to pull it deeper, to make it better, to control it. And notice how the breath goes out, and there might be a small urge to let everything go slack, to stop paying attention, to drift away. The middle way is neither of these. It is simply being present with the breath as it is, without forcing, without abandoning. This is not a metaphor, this is the path itself, showing you its nature in something as simple as breathing. The fourth noble truth tells us that this path has 8 aspects, 8 ways of bringing this quality of balance into our lives. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. These are not rules handed down from above. They are descriptions of what it looks like to walk in the middle, to live without the exhaustion of constant striving or the fog of constant escape. You've probably noticed how tiring it is to live at the extremes, how much energy it takes to maintain the fiction that you can control everything, perfect everything, fix everything about yourself and your life. And you have probably also noticed the peculiar heaviness that comes from giving up, from deciding that nothing you do makes any difference, that you might as well just let the current carry you wherever it goes. The path between these is not easier exactly, but it is walkable. It is the difference between trying to run uphill forever and learning to walk at a pace your body can sustain. It is the difference between lying down in the middle of the road and actually moving forward step by step on ground that is real. When you return to that neighborhood path, the one your feet know, you might notice something. The path is not perfectly flat. It rises and falls. It curves. There are cracks and repairs, places where the concrete has been patched. And yet you walk it without drama, without making each imperfection into a crisis. Your body adjusts, your balance shifts, you keep walking. This is what the Buddha meant by the middle way. Not perfection, not indifference, but a kind of responsive balance that meets each moment as it actually is. Right now, you might bring your attention to the sounds around you, not searching for pleasant sounds or pushing away unpleasant ones, just listening, hearing what is here. There is a quality of attention that neither grasps nor rejects. And you are already on it, right now. in this moment, in the simple fact of your attention arriving here, in these words, in this breath, in this willingness to see what the Buddha saw, that there is a way through suffering, and it begins with learning to walk the ground beneath your feet. It simply recedes. This quality, this way of being present without extremes, is what the Eightfold Path cultivates in every dimension of your life. The path is not something you complete, it is something you walk. There is a kind of tiredness that comes not from effort, but from constant movement between two poles. You reach for what feels good, you pull back from what hurts, and in all that reaching and pulling, something inside you never rests. The Buddha said he taught one thing and one thing only, suffering and the end of suffering. Not philosophy, not cosmology, just this simple fact of human pain and the way through it. And what he saw, sitting under that tree so long ago, was that most of our suffering comes from this endless swinging back and forth. A bird that flies too high grows tired. The air thins, the wings work harder. But if it drops too low, it scrapes the ground, risks collision, loses the current that holds it up. Somewhere between those extremes, there is a place where flight becomes almost effortless. The bird finds the middle air and rides it. You can feel this in your own life if you look closely. When something pleasant happens, there is a reaching toward it, a wanting it to stay, to intensify, to repeat. When something unpleasant arises, there is a pushing away, a tightening, a wish for it to be different right now. Both movements feel necessary, both feel like survival. But watch what happens in your body when you do this. The chest tightens, the breath shortens. The mind speeds up, planning, defending, grasping. This is not rest. This is exhaustion, pretending to be action. The fourth noble truth points to a different possibility. It says there is a path that does not require you to chase or flee, not because chasing and fleeing are morally wrong, but because they do not actually end the suffering. They perpetuate it. Every time you reach for pleasure, you set up the conditions for disappointment when it fades. Every time you push away pain, you add resistance to the pain itself, and resistance is its own kind of ache. The path the Buddha described is not about forcing yourself into some rigid middle position. It is not about denying yourself pleasure or pretending pain does not hurt. It is about learning to meet experience without the extra movement of grasping or aversion. It is about finding the middle air. You might notice this first in small moments. You are drinking your morning tea, and it tastes good. There is a subtle reaching in the mind, a wanting the next sip to be just as good, a planning around when you will have this tea again. Or you are stuck in traffic, and there is a tightness in your shoulders, a mental argument with the situation, a pushing against what is already here. These are not dramatic moments. They are quiet and constant, and they're where the path begins. When you notice one of these moments today, you do not need to fix it. You do not need to stop grasping or stop pushing away. You only need to name it. Grasping, aversion, reaching, pulling back. The naming itself creates a small gap, a breath of space between the impulse and your identification with it. In that gap, you are no longer the bird flying too high or scraping too low. You are the awareness that sees the whole sky. This is not a thought exercise, it is direct perception. You feel the pull in your chest when you want something to continue. You feel the clench in your jaw when you want something to stop. And you feel the difference between those sensations and the simple presence that notices them. That presence does not grasp, it does not push away, it is the middle air. The practice is small because the shift is subtle. You are not trying to become a different person. You are learning to observe the person you already are with a little more clarity. And clarity, even a sliver of it, changes the whole texture of experience. When you see grasping as grasping, it loosens slightly. When you see aversion as aversion, it softens at the edges. Not because you are controlling it, but because you are no longer feeding it with the belief that it is the only response available. You are standing in a different relationship to your own mind. The bird does not think its way into the middle air. It feels the currents, it adjusts, it finds the place where the wind holds it, and the effort eases. You can do the same. Not by analyzing every impulse, but by noticing when you are working too hard to hold on or push away, and pausing just long enough to feel what that effort costs you. The difference between reacting and observing is not dramatic, it is quiet. It is the difference between being carried by the wind and fighting it. One feels like struggle, the other feels like coming home. We hear the phrase middle path, and something in us relaxes a little too much. We imagine it means we don't have to try so hard. We think it's permission to care less, to stay comfortable, to split every difference down the center and call it wisdom. But this is not what the Buddha meant when he spoke of the path between extremes. He was not teaching compromise. He was teaching clear seeing. There is a story about the Buddha speaking with a musician who had joined the community of monks. This man had been practicing with such intensity that his feet bled. He pushed himself without rest, believing that liberation required absolute severity. But he was exhausted, and his mind had grown dull rather than clear. The Buddha asked him about his instrument, about tuning the strings. What happens when a string is too tight? It snaps. What happens when it's too loose? It makes no sound. The musician understood immediately. The middle path is not about caring half as much. It is about tuning yourself so that you can actually play. This is where we get confused. We think balance means never going all the way in any direction. We think it means protecting ourselves from feeling too much, from wanting too much, from the risk of breaking. But look closely at what the Buddha was pointing toward. He was not saying to avoid intensity. He was saying to see clearly what causes harm and what does not. When we are too rigid, we create suffering. We hold our breath. We clench against experience. We make rules that have nothing to do with wisdom and everything to do with fear. We tell ourselves that if we just control enough, plan enough, perfect enough, we will finally be safe. But the string snaps. The body breaks down. The mind becomes brittle. This is not the path. When we are too lax, we also create suffering. We drift. We numb ourselves. We avoid anything that asks us to show up fully. We tell ourselves we are being kind to ourselves, but really we are hiding. We let the string go slack, and there is no music, only silence that feels like absence rather than peace. This is not the path either. The middle way asks us to feel the difference, not to think about it abstractly, but to notice it in the body, in the breath, in the quality of attention itself. Right now, as you hear these words, you might notice where you are holding too tightly. Maybe it's in your shoulders. Maybe it's in the way you are listening, trying to get this exactly right, trying to make sure you understand perfectly. Or you might notice where you have gone slack. Maybe your attention is drifting. Maybe you are half here and half somewhere else, not quite willing to meet this moment fully. Neither tightness nor slackness brings clarity. Clarity comes when we adjust. Think of one area in your life where you have been too rigid. Maybe it's the way you eat, or the way you work, or the way you speak to yourself when you make a mistake. Notice what happens in your body when you think of this area. Do you feel tension? Do you feel the grip of fear? Now ask yourself, what would it be like to loosen just slightly? Not to abandon care, but to release the clench. Not to stop trying, but to stop strangling the effort. Or think of one area where you have been too lax. Maybe it's your meditation practice, showing up only when it's convenient. Maybe it's a relationship you have let drift. Maybe it's your own health, your own heart. Notice what happens when you think of this area. Do you feel a kind of fog, a reluctance to look directly? Now ask yourself, what would it be like to tighten just slightly? Not to force, but to bring attention. Not to punish yourself, but to actually care. The path is not found by splitting the difference. It is found by tuning, and tuning requires listening. You cannot tune a string by following a rule. You have to hear the sound it makes. You have to feel the tension in your hands. You have to adjust, listen again, adjust again. This is why the middle path is not lukewarm. It is alive. It requires more attention than either extreme, not less. When we are rigid, we can follow the rigidity without thinking. When we are lax, we can drift without noticing. But when we walk the middle path, we have to stay awake. We have to keep sensing what is happening right now. Balance is not indifference. Indifference is what happens when we stop caring about the sound we make. Balance is what happens when we care enough to keep listening, to keep adjusting, to keep meeting this life as it actually is. The string that is tuned just right does not play itself. Someone has to touch it. Someone has to bring breath and intention and presence. But when it is tuned, the music comes easily. There is effort, but not strain. There is rest, but not collapse. You will know the difference by what arises. Indifference feels flat. Balance feels alive. There's a moment that happens sometimes on a still night near water. You look down and see the moon perfectly reflected on the surface. The image is so clear, so complete, that you could spend the whole evening studying it. The way the light plays across the ripples, the shadows that seem to give it depth. You might even reach out your hand, thinking you could touch it. And then someone asks you to describe the moon, and you realize you've been looking at water the whole time. This is what we do with our experience. We look at the reflection and forget there's something else to see. When anger arrives, we don't feel anger. We feel the story of anger. The narrative of who wronged us and why they shouldn't have, and what it means about them and about us. When sadness comes, we're already inside the explanation, the reasons, the history, the implications for tomorrow. The Buddha said that things are not as they appear, nor are they otherwise. Not this, not that. It sounds like a riddle, but it's pointing to something you can test right now. The experience you're having is real. The sensation in your chest is real. The tightness in your jaw is real. But the story you're telling about what it means, that's the reflection. And we spend so much time studying the reflection that we forget to look up. The path between extremes doesn't mean finding a middle ground between two positions. It means seeing that the positions themselves are made of thought. One extreme says the story is absolutely true. The other says nothing matters at all. Both are looking at the water. You can notice this in small moments. You're waiting for a message from someone and it doesn't come. Immediately, there's a feeling. But what is the feeling before you name it? Before you decide, it means they're upset with you, or they've forgotten you, or they don't care. There's a sensation. Maybe a tightness, maybe a kind of falling feeling in the belly, maybe heat. And then, so quickly you almost miss it, the story arrives, the interpretation, the meaning. The story isn't wrong exactly, it's just not the moon. When a strong emotion arises, you can pause, not to fix it or change it or make it go away. Just to ask, what am I actually sensing right now before the story? Not what does this mean, not why is this happening, just what is the raw data of this moment. You might find tension across your shoulders. You might find your breath has become shallow. You might find a kind of buzzing in your hands or a weight behind your eyes. These sensations are direct. They don't require interpretation. They're just here, the way temperature is here or sound is here. The story will still be there. The thoughts will keep coming. But now you're looking at the reflection and the moon at the same time. You're seeing that they're not the same thing. This is what awareness does. It doesn't argue with the story. It doesn't try to replace one interpretation with a better one. It just notices the difference between sensing and thinking, between what's happening and what we say about what's happening. Someone cuts you off in traffic. There's a jolt. The body responds. Then the story, they're reckless, they don't care, people are selfish. But underneath the story, what's actually present? A faster heartbeat, a grip on the steering wheel, a surge of something hot and electric. That's the experience before the interpretation. You can practice this with small things first. The annoyance when your phone is slow, the flutter when you see an unexpected email, the heaviness when you remember something you need to do. Each time, the same question, what am I actually sensing before the story? Not to make the story wrong, not to transcend emotion or become someone who doesn't feel, just to see the difference, to know the reflection for what it is. Things are not as they appear. The anger is not the story about anger. The loneliness is not the explanation of loneliness, nor are they otherwise. The sensation is real. The experience is happening. You're not imagining it or making it up. But when you look directly, when you feel the tightness in your throat or the ache in your chest without immediately asking what it means, something shifts. The experience is still here, but is no longer solid in the same way. It's more like weather, passing through. You can feel sadness without being sad. You can notice anger without becoming anger. Not because you've detached or numbed yourself, but because you've learned to look up from the water. The sensation and the story, both present, both visible, but no longer confused for each other. You have done this 1,000 times. You reach for your phone without thinking. You say yes when you mean no. You snap at someone you love, and only later do you wonder why. The action arrives first. The understanding, if it comes at all, trails behind like an afterthought. This is the hidden architecture of suffering. We move through our days guided by a rudder we cannot see, turning left and right according to forces we have not examined. The boat goes where it goes. We sit in it, surprised by the destination. The Buddha taught that intention precedes everything. Before the hand moves, before the word forms, there is a wanting. Sometimes it is clear and conscious. More often it is not. It hides in the shadows of habit, in the momentum of old stories, in the unspoken belief that this time will be different if we just push a little harder. You reach for the phone because you want relief from discomfort. You say yes because you want to be seen as generous, or because you fear conflict. You snap because underneath the tiredness there is a wish to be understood, to have your needs met without having to name them. These wants are not wrong. They are simply unexamined. And when we do not see them, they steer us into patterns we did not choose. The Fourth Noble Truth offers a path between two extremes. On one side is indulgence, following every impulse, believing that satisfaction lies in getting what we want. On the other side is denial, suppressing desire, pretending we are above wanting anything at all. Neither works. Indulgence leaves us hungry no matter how much we consume. Denial leaves us rigid, cut off from the honest texture of being human. The middle way asks something different. It asks us to see the rudder, not to destroy it, not to pretend it is not there, but to bring it into the light. To notice the wanting before the action, to feel the tug of intention as it shapes what comes next. This is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming aware. You do not need to change every impulse. You only need to meet one with clear eyes. Just one. Before you act today, pause. It does not need to be a dramatic moment. It can be small, reaching for a snack, opening an app, choosing what to say in a conversation that has started to tighten. In that pause, ask yourself, what do I truly want from this? Not what you think you should want, not the polite answer, the real one. Maybe you want comfort. Maybe you want distraction. Maybe you want to be right, or to feel safe, or to avoid feeling anything at all. Whatever it is, let it be named. Let it surface without judgment. This is where the path begins. Not in having pure intentions, but in knowing what your intentions actually are. The mind precedes all things. With intention, we shape our world. If we do not know what we are intending, we shape blindly. We wonder why the same patterns repeat. We blame circumstances, other people, bad luck. But the rudder beneath the surface has been turning the whole time. When you see the intention clearly, something shifts. You still might take the action. You might still reach for the phone, still say yes, still speak the sharp word. But now there is space around it. The action is no longer automatic. It is chosen, even if the choice is to follow the old pattern one more time. And in that choosing, a small freedom appears. Sometimes the seeing itself is enough. You notice the wanting, and it loses its grip. The hand pauses halfway to the phone. The yes becomes a quiet no. The sharp word softens into silence. Not because you forced it, but because the light of awareness changed the conditions. The rudder, once hidden, is now visible, and what is visible can be adjusted. Other times you see the wanting and follow it anyway. This is also part of the path. There is no failure here. The practice is the seeing, not the outcome. Each time you pause, each time you ask what you truly want, you are training the mind to wake up before it acts. You are learning the feel of intention as it moves through you. Over time, this becomes a living presence, not a concept you remember when it is convenient, but a quality of attention that runs beneath your days. You begin to sense the rudder more often. You feel the moment before the turn. And in that feeling you find a kind of choice you did not know was there. This is the path the Buddha described. Not a set of rules, but a way of meeting yourself with honesty. Not perfection, but presence. The intention is already there. It has always been there. You are only learning to see it. There is a moment between hearing and speaking that most of us never notice. Someone finishes their sentence and already our reply is forming. We are not listening to them anymore. We are listening to ourselves, rehearsing what we will say next, adjusting our tone, choosing our angle. The conversation becomes two people, taking turns broadcasting, and the space between them grows wider with every word. The Buddha offered a teaching that sounds simple until you try to live it. Speak only when your words are more beautiful than silence, not more clever, not more correct, more beautiful. This is not about poetry. It is about whether your words bring something into the room that was not there before, something that serves the moment, rather than your need to be seen or heard or right. Watch what happens when you drop a stone into still water. The surface breaks. Ripples move outward in widening circles. They touch everything. They do not ask permission. They do not stop until they reach the edges. Your words are like this. Once spoken, they move. They enter the listener and change something. You cannot call them back. You cannot soften them after the fact. The ripples are already spreading. We speak for so many reasons that have nothing to do with connection. We speak to prove we were paying attention. We speak to show we understand, or that we have suffered too, or that we know more than we are being credited for. We speak to fill a silence that feels too vulnerable, too exposing. We speak because we are uncomfortable, and speaking is something to do. And in all of this, we are not meeting the other person. We are managing our own anxiety. There is a different way. Before you speak today, take one breath. Just one. In that breath, ask yourself 3 questions. Is this true? Is this kind? Is this necessary? Not as a test you must pass, but as a way of feeling into what you are about to release into the world. True means you are not exaggerating, not performing, not shaping the story to make yourself look better. Kind means your words do not harm. even subtly, even in the guise of honesty. Necessary means the moment actually calls for this, that silence would leave something incomplete. These three questions are not about perfection. You will speak imperfectly. You will say things you wish you had not said. But the breath before speaking creates a gap, and in that gap, you have a choice. You can feel the urge to defend yourself and choose not to. You can notice the impulse to correct someone and let it pass. You can sense the discomfort of quiet and decide to stay with it instead of rushing to cover it with noise. Most of our speaking is automatic. Someone criticizes us and the defense is already in our throat. Someone shares good news and we are already thinking of our own story to match it. Someone sits in silence and we fill it because we have been taught that silence is awkward, that it means something is wrong. But silence is not empty. Silence is the water before the stone drops. It is whole, it is enough. When you take that one breath before speaking, you are not just pausing, you are returning to your body. You are noticing the tightness in your chest, the heat in your face, the speed of your thoughts. You are feeling the weight of what you are about to say. Words have weight. They have consequence. When you speak from reactivity, the ripples are sharp and chaotic. When you speak from that breath, from that question, the ripples are clear. They move outward with intention, and what they touch is changed in a way that serves. This is not about becoming silent. It is not about withholding or suppressing. It is about discovering that you have a voice worth listening to. And that voice emerges not from your need to be heard, but from your willingness to serve the truth of the moment. Compassion begins here, not in grand gestures, but in the small choice to let your words land softly, to let them carry only what is true and kind and necessary. You will notice as you practice this how often you almost speak and then do not. How often the breath reveals that what you were about to say was not necessary, or not kind, or not even true. And in those moments of not speaking, something else happens. You actually hear the other person. You feel the room. You notice what is already present, and you realize that your silence is not absence. It is attention. It is respect. It is the still water, waiting. We have learned to believe that effort must feel like pushing, that the right way to do anything important is to bear down, clench a little, hold ourselves to the task. And we have learned too that rest is what happens when we finally let go completely, when we collapse into stillness because we cannot hold on any longer. Between these two poles we move, back and forth, never quite noticing that both feel like a kind of violence. Water does not do this. When it meets a stone in the stream bed, it does not stop. It does not fight. It finds the shape of what is there and moves along the surface, around the edge, through the smallest opening. The water continues. It has somewhere to go, but it is not in a hurry to get there. This is what the old Zen teachers meant when they said, chop wood, carry water. Before enlightenment and after, the same. They were not being cryptic. They were pointing to something we have forgotten. The path is not separate from the life you are already living. It is not something you do later, after you have fixed yourself or found the right conditions. The path is chopping the wood that needs chopping. It is carrying the water that needs carrying, and the question is only whether you are present for it or whether you are somewhere else, arguing with the fact that it needs to be done. We think that mindfulness means adding something, a layer of attention, a quality of awareness, some special effort that transforms the ordinary into the sacred. But this is not it. Mindfulness is only the removal of distraction. It is what remains when you stop dividing your attention between what is happening and what you wish were happening instead. You do not need to make washing the dishes into a spiritual practice. You only need to wash the dishes. Feel the warm water. Notice the weight of the plate. See the soap slide across the surface. This is not preparation for some other moment. This is the moment. The fourth noble truth is called the path, and we imagine it must be something we travel toward a destination. But the word in Pali is magga, and it means something closer to a way of walking. Not the road itself, but the manner of your steps. You are already walking. The question is whether you are here for it. When you try to do something with full attention, you will notice how quickly the mind wants to split. Part of you will be washing the glass, and part of you will be planning what comes next, and another part will be judging how well you are doing at paying attention. This is normal. This is what minds do. You do not need to fight this. Water does not fight the stone. It simply moves as water moves, and the stone remains as the stone remains, and both are fine. So when you notice you have left the task, you can just return, not with frustration, not with the sense that you have failed some test. You return the way you would turn your head to look at something you had not noticed before, gently, with interest. The practice is very simple. Today choose one ordinary task, not something grand. Not meditation or yoga or anything you have labeled spiritual. Choose something you do anyway. Making tea, folding laundry, sweeping the floor, tying your shoes. And do it with full attention and no hurry. No hurry does not mean slow. It means without the feeling that this moment is in the way of the next moment. You can move quickly and still be unhurried. You can move slowly and still be rushing. The difference is not in the speed. It is in whether you are fighting what is. Full attention does not mean perfect attention. It means you notice when you have wandered, and you come back. Again and again you come back. This is the whole practice. Not the staying, but the returning. You'll see if you try this that the task does not feel the way it usually feels. There is a quality of ease that has nothing to do with whether the task is easy. You might be scrubbing something that requires real effort, real pressure, and still there can be ease in it. Because ease is not the absence of effort. Ease is effort without resistance. It is the difference between pushing a door that is locked and pushing a door that swings open. The same motion, but one is fighting and one is participating. When you chop wood with full attention, the chopping is just chopping. When you carry water with full attention, the carrying is just carrying. Before enlightenment and after, the same. Not because nothing has changed, but because the wood and the water were never the problem. The problem was the part of you that was somewhere else, wishing you were not chopping, not carrying, not here. Action becomes participation when you stop asking it to be different than it is. The water keeps moving, the stone stays still, and both are part of the same stream. There is a split many of us carry but rarely name. We speak of work as one thing and life as another. We say we go to work and then we come home to live, as if the hours we spend earning are separate from the hours we spend being who we are, as if integrity could be set aside for part of the day and picked up again when we clock out. A tree that grows in poisoned soil may stand tall but bears no fruit. Its roots draw from contaminated ground. Its leaves turn toward the sun. From a distance, it looks healthy, but something essential is missing. The nourishment it takes in cannot become what it was meant to offer. This is not about changing jobs tomorrow or abandoning responsibility. It is about noticing what happens inside when the ground beneath your work is misaligned with what you know to be true. You might feel it as a low hum of unease, a tightness in the chest when you describe what you do. A small voice you have learned to ignore. The body knows before the mind admits it. The Buddha taught that right livelihood is part of the path, not an optional addition, not something to address later when you have more freedom. It sits alongside right speech and right action, because how we earn shapes how we live. He said clearly, do not pursue work that harms yourself or others, even if it brings comfort, even if it pays well, even if everyone else is doing it. This teaching does not come with a list of acceptable professions. It asks you to look directly at what your work creates in the world and what it costs you to create it. Does it require you to deceive? Does it profit from another's suffering? Does it ask you to become someone you would not choose to be? The tree in poisoned soil does not choose its ground, but we do. And the poison is not always obvious. Sometimes it is subtle. A workplace that demands you hide your care. A role that asks you to sell what you do not believe in. An environment where speaking truthfully means risking everything. The harm may not be dramatic. It may just be the slow erosion of your sense of alignment, the quiet draining of your capacity to trust yourself. You might notice this in a single moment today. Perhaps when you are writing an email and you feel yourself choosing words that obscure rather than clarify. Or when you are in a meeting and you stay silent about something that matters. Or when you finish a task and feel nothing, not satisfaction, not even tiredness, just a kind of hollow completion. These moments are not failures, they are information. Equanimity does not mean accepting everything without question. It means meeting what is true with steadiness. It means you can look at the misalignment without collapsing into shame or rushing into reaction. You can simply see it. This work asks me to be less than whole. This role requires me to ignore what I know. This is the cost I am paying. And then there are moments of alignment, perhaps rarer but unmistakable when they come. You help someone and it feels clean. You solve a problem and the solution serves more than just profit. You speak honestly and the ground beneath you feels solid. These moments are also information. They show you what it feels like when your livelihood and your values grow from the same soil. The path between extremes is not about perfection. It is not about finding work that harms no one and costs you nothing. That may not exist. But the path asks you to stop pretending the split does not matter, to stop treating your work life as separate from your inner life, to notice when you are drawing from poisoned ground, and to ask yourself what that is doing to you over time. A tree cannot bear fruit when its roots are compromised. You cannot live with integrity when half your waking hours are spent in misalignment, not because you are weak, but because this is how human beings work. We are not divided creatures. What we do becomes who we are. The choices we make each day, the small compromises, the moments we speak or stay silent, they shape us. So the practice is simple. Notice one moment in your work today when you feel aligned or misaligned with your values. Not to fix it, not to judge yourself, just to see it clearly, to feel the difference in your body between the two. Alignment has a quality, a sense of ground beneath you. Misalignment has a quality too, a subtle contraction, a need to look away from yourself. This noticing is not separate from the path, it is the path, because you cannot walk toward what is wholesome if you cannot sense the difference between nourishment and poison. There is a kind of effort that feels like pushing against a locked door. You lean in harder, jaw tight, breath shallow, certain that if you just apply more force, something will give. And there is another kind of effort that feels like no effort at all, a drifting, a letting go that becomes indifference. Both feel familiar, both promise relief. Neither one carries us very far. The Buddha spoke of a path that walks between these two. He said to rouse energy for what is wholesome, but not to strain, to let go of what is harmful, but not to collapse. This is not a compromise between opposites. It is something else entirely, a kind of attention that learns the difference between working with conditions and working against them. Think of tending a fire on a cold night. You want warmth. You want light. So you gather wood and place it carefully over the coals, but if you pile on too much at once, the flames smother beneath the weight, the fire chokes, and if you add too little, if you walk away too long, the embers cool and darken, the fire dies. What keeps it alive is neither force nor neglect. It is responsiveness. You watch, you adjust, you add what is needed when it is needed. This is how the path asks to be walked, not with grinding determination, not with passive hoping, with something closer to listening. Craving is what makes us pile on the wood. It says more will be better, faster will be safer. If I just push harder, I will finally arrive. And so we strain. We set impossible standards. We berate ourselves when we stumble. We treat the path like a battle to be won, and our own hearts like obstacles to be conquered. The fire smothers, but craving also whispers the opposite. It says, "This is too hard. You are not built for this." Why bother when nothing changes? And so we let the practice go cold. We stop sitting. We stop noticing. We tell ourselves we will return when conditions are better, when we feel more ready, when life is less demanding. The fire dies. Both of these come from the same root. Both are attempts to escape the discomfort of simply being here, in this moment, with things as they are. One escapes forward into striving. The other escapes backward into withdrawal. Neither one trusts the ground beneath our feet. When you feel resistance today, pause, not to fix it, not to push through it or give in to it. Just pause and ask, am I forcing or am I flowing? This is not a question that demands an immediate answer. It is an invitation to feel the quality of your effort. Is your breath tight? Are your shoulders raised? Is there a sense of grinding, of trying to make something happen that is not yet ready to happen? That is forcing. Or is there a heaviness, a sense of why bother, a turning away from what is difficult because it feels like too much? That is collapse. Neither one is wrong. Neither one is a failure. They are just what happens when we lose touch with the rhythm of things. When we forget that the path is not a straight line, we carve through rock. It is more like walking through a forest. Sometimes the ground is clear. Sometimes roots cross the trail. Sometimes we move quickly. Sometimes we move slowly. The question is not how fast we go. The question is whether we are still walking. You can feel this in the body. Forcing has a signature. There is tension in the jaw, the belly, the hands. The breath becomes shallow. The mind narrows to a single point. I must, I should, I have to. Collapsing has a signature too. There is a sinking, a heaviness, a sense of the energy draining away. The breath becomes dull. The mind scatters or goes numb. Between these two is a third possibility. It feels like cooperation, like adding one piece of wood to the fire and watching to see what happens. Like taking one breath and then another, not because you are trying to get somewhere, but because breathing is what is here to be done. This is effort that does not strain. This is letting go that does not abandon. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It is quiet and steady and surprisingly sustainable. It is the kind of effort that can be maintained not just for an hour or a day, but for a lifetime. Because it is not at war with anything, not with the difficulty, not with yourself. The fire teaches this. You do not command it to burn. You create conditions. You shelter it from wind. You feed it steadily. You give it air. And then you let it do what fire does. Effort feels like cooperation with conditions when you stop trying to force outcomes and start tending what is actually here. There is a bell in a temple somewhere. It rings once, and the sound moves through the air, full and clear. Then it fades. The silence that follows is not failure. It is simply what happens after a bell has rung. And then, when the moment is right, someone strikes it again. The sound returns, just as full, just as clear. Each ring is complete in itself. You may have noticed that mindfulness does not stay. You sit down with the intention to be present, and for a moment you are. The breath is vivid, the body is felt, and then, without warning, you are somewhere else entirely. Planning tomorrow, replaying yesterday, caught in a thought you did not choose to think. And when you notice this, there is often a small collapse inside, a sense that you have failed again. This feeling is so common, it is almost invisible. We carry the belief that mindfulness is a state we should be able to hold, like carrying a glass of water without spilling. And each time the mind wanders, we interpret it as evidence that we are not good at this, that we are doing it wrong, that others must find it easier. But the teaching from Zen does not support this view. It says that Zen is not about never falling, but about standing up each time you do. The emphasis is not on the staying, it is on the returning. This is not a small distinction, it changes everything. When you believe that the goal is to remain in awareness without interruption, then each moment of distraction becomes a problem to solve. You tighten around the practice, you try harder. You monitor yourself for signs of wandering, which is itself a kind of wandering. The mind becomes a place of effort and evaluation, and mindfulness, which is meant to be a refuge, becomes another arena for self-judgment. But if the practice is returning, then distraction is not failure. It is simply the condition that makes returning possible. You cannot return to something you never left, and you cannot leave something you were never truly holding. The mind moves. This is its nature. Thoughts arise, pull attention with them, and eventually release it. What we are learning is not how to stop this movement, but how to meet it without adding suffering. The bell rings and fades. This is not a flaw in the bell. It is how sound works. And when it rings again, it does not carry the memory of having faded. It is simply sound arriving now. You might try something today if it feels right. 3 times at moments you choose, or when a reminder finds you, pause and ask, where is my attention right now? Not where should it be? Not where was it a moment ago? Just where is it in this moment? You may find it on a sound, on a sensation in the body, on a thought that is already half dissolved. It does not matter where you find it. What matters is the noticing itself. That small, quiet turn of awareness back toward experience. This is the returning. It happens in a breath. There is no need to correct what you find, no need to push away the distraction or cling to the awareness. You are simply seeing where attention has landed, the way you might glance out a window and notice it has started to rain. Oh, there you are. Each time you do this, you are not building towards some future state of unbroken presence. You are practicing the movement itself, the turn, the recognition, the willingness to begin again without resentment. This is the path the Fourth Noble Truth points to. Not a straight line toward perfection, but a way of walking that includes the stumble, the pause, the step forward again. In Zen monasteries, students sit in meditation for hours, and in those hours the mind wanders thousands of times. This is expected. What is being trained is not the ability to prevent wandering, but the capacity to notice it has happened and return without drama. Each return is the practice, not a detour from the practice, not a sign that the practice is not working. The practice itself, the bell rings, you hear it, then you do not, and then it rings again, and the sound is no less true for having been absent. Your awareness is like this. It arrives, it recedes, it arrives again. What you are learning is trust in the arriving. Not in your ability to make it stay, but in its willingness to return when you remember to listen. This is enough. The returning is the practice, not the staying. You hold a magnifying glass in your hand on a bright afternoon. The light passes through it, spreads across the ground in a wide, pale circle. Nothing changes. The grass stays cool. But tilt the glass just so, gather all that scattered brightness into a single point, and suddenly there is heat. There is presence. The same light that was everywhere and nowhere becomes something you can feel. Your attention works this way too. Right now, as you listen, part of you might be here with these words. Another part, remembering something from earlier today. Another part, planning or resisting or wondering how long this will take. The light of your awareness spreads thin across a dozen surfaces, and nothing quite comes alive. This is not a failure. This is simply what happens when we live in a world that asks us to be many places at once. The fourth noble truth points toward a path, and the path asks something simple of us, not perfection, not constant vigilance, just the willingness to gather what has been scattered. A mind unified is a mind at peace. Fragmentation is the root of restlessness. You have felt this, even if you have never named it. You have felt the difference between a day where your attention moves from task to task, surface to surface, never quite landing, and a day where you give yourself fully to one thing. In the first, you are busy but somehow absent. In the second, even if you do less, you are here. The restlessness we carry is not always about what is happening. Often, it is about how many places we are trying to be at once. You check your phone while talking to a friend. You plan dinner while eating breakfast. You think about tomorrow while your body is still in today. Each fragment seems small, harmless even. But together they create a life where nothing feels vivid, where presence becomes rare. The path between extremes does not ask you to eliminate distraction through force. It does not ask you to become someone who never wanders. It asks you to notice the scattering and then, gently, to gather. This is where the practice becomes simple. You do not need an hour. You do not need perfect conditions. You need 5 minutes and one object. A candle, if you have one. The small movement of the flame, the way it holds still and shifts at once. Or your breath, the cool air arriving, the warm air leaving. Or a sound outside your window, a bird or distant traffic, something that continues without you. Choose one. Let it be the point where the light gathers. For 5 minutes, this is your whole world. Not because other things stop existing, but because you stop trying to hold them all at once. When your mind moves toward planning, you notice. When it reaches for a memory, you notice. And without judgment, without making it mean something about you, you return. To the flame, to the breath, to the sound. You will return many times. This is not a sign that you are doing it wrong. This is the practice itself. Each time you notice you have wandered and come back, you are gathering the light. You are learning what it feels like when attention, diffuse and pale across 100 things, draws into a single point of warmth. At first, nothing may seem to change. The candle is just a candle. The breath is just breath. But stay a little longer. Let the returning happen again and again, patient and soft. Something begins to shift. The object does not become more interesting. You become more present. The quality of your attention changes. What was mechanical becomes alive. What was far away arrives. This is not magic. This is what happens when we stop dividing ourselves. The stillness that comes from gathering is not the stillness of emptiness, it is the stillness of wholeness. You are here fully, and the restlessness that comes from being scattered has nowhere left to live. You do not need to do this perfectly. You do not need to sustain it for long. 5 minutes of real presence teaches you more than an hour of fragmented effort. And once you have tasted it, once you know what it feels like when the light gathers into warmth, you carry that knowing with you. You begin to notice in the rest of your life when you are scattering again, not as a problem to fix, but as an invitation to return. The path is not about becoming someone else, it is about coming back to where you already are. You walk the path every day, and still you wonder if you're doing it right. You sit, you breathe, you notice the mind wandering and bring it back. Some mornings the practice feels clear, almost effortless. Other mornings it feels like pushing against fog. You want to know, is this working? Am I getting somewhere? The wanting itself is not wrong. It's human to seek solid ground. But the fourth noble truth asks something different of you. It asks you to walk a path that does not harden beneath your feet. You have learned that craving causes suffering. You have seen how aversion tightens the chest. You have begun to sense the middle way, the path that does not grasp at pleasure or push away pain. And still, quietly, you hope the path itself will become permanent. You hope that one day the practice will click into place and stay there, reliable as stone. But all conditioned things are impermanent. The teaching does not say this to discourage you. It says this because it is true. The clarity you felt last week has shifted. The calm you touched yesterday may not return today. And the path you walk now, this very moment, is not the same path you walked a year ago. It cannot be. You are not the same person. Think of footprints on a beach. You step into wet sand and the shape is clear. The ridge of your heel, the curve of your arch, the press of your toes. For a moment it holds. You can see exactly where you have been. But the tide does not ask permission. It moves, as it always moves, and the water smooths what you have made. The footprint does not vanish all at once. It softens at the edges first. Then the details blur. Then it is gone, and the sand is level again, waiting for the next step. This is not failure. This is the nature of conditioned things. You practice diligence, not because it will make the path permanent, but because impermanence asks for your attention. Diligence here does not mean forcing yourself forward. It means showing up even when the ground shifts. It means taking the next step even when you cannot see where it leads. The path is not a ladder you climb once and stay at the top. It is a living thing. It breathes, it changes, and so do you. When you notice one thing today that has changed since yesterday, you are not looking for proof of progress or decline. You are simply looking. Maybe the light in your room falls differently now. Maybe the tree outside your window has lost another leaf. Maybe your body feels heavier today, or lighter, or the same, but in a different way. The noticing itself is the practice, not the judgment that follows. Not the story about whether the change is good or bad, just the seeing. Let it be exactly as it is. This is not passivity, this is clear sight. When you let the change be what it is, you stop trying to freeze the footprint in the sand. You stop hoping the tide will forget to turn. You see that the water is already moving, and you do not fight it. The path between extremes is not a tightrope stretched between two poles. It is more like walking along the shore where the water meets the sand. Sometimes your feet are dry. Sometimes the wave reaches you and the water is cold. You do not cling to the dry moments. You do not push away the wet ones. You walk, and the conditions change, and you keep walking. This is what it means to strive with diligence while knowing nothing lasts. The striving is not grasping. The knowing is not despair. You practice because the practice matters, and you hold it lightly because it will not stay the same. The breath you took this morning is not the breath you take now. The thought that troubled you yesterday may not trouble you today, or it may, but even then it will not be identical. It will have a different texture, a different weight. You can hold change without clinging to what was or fearing what will be. You can see the footprint fade and still take the next step. The path does not betray you when it shifts. It is simply showing you what has always been true. Nothing conditioned lasts, and still here you are, walking. Still here is the breath. Still here is this moment, unrepeatable, already passing, and entirely enough. You have heard about the path. Perhaps you have read about it, listened to teachings, felt inspired by the idea that there is a way forward. The fourth noble truth speaks of this path, the one that leads to the end of suffering. And yet something strange happens when we begin to walk. We imagine ourselves as a solid traveller moving along a solid road. We picture a self that must carry itself from here to there, from confusion to clarity, from suffering to peace. This picture feels true. It feels like the most obvious thing in the world. But this picture is where the suffering begins again. The teaching says the path is not separate from the walker. When you walk, the path appears. This is not poetry meant to sound beautiful. It points to something you can observe right now. There is no path waiting for you somewhere else. There is no fixed self who will one day arrive. There is only this step, this breath, this moment of awareness arising and passing. Think of a river. You stand beside it and you say, "This is the river." But if you look closely, you see that no single drop of water remains the same. The water that touched the bank a moment ago has already moved downstream. New water arrives. The shape changes. The current shifts with the wind and the stones beneath. And yet the river flows on. You do not say the river has disappeared. You do not say it is broken or lost. It is a river precisely because it does not hold still. You are like this. What you call I is not a single thing moving through time. It is a process. Sensations arise in the body. Thoughts appear in the mind. Feelings come and go like weather. There is seeing, hearing, tasting, touching. There is memory and anticipation. All of this is happening, yes. But where in this flow is the solid self you imagine? Where is the one who owns this experience? When you try to walk the path with the belief that you are a fixed self, you create a problem that cannot be solved. You ask, am I doing this right? Am I making progress? Why am I still struggling? These questions assume there is a you who can succeed or fail, who can be ahead or behind. But the river does not ask if it is flowing correctly, it simply flows. The path appears when you walk. This means the walking itself is the path, not the idea of walking, not the plan to walk someday, the actual step you take right now, the breath you feel in your chest, the sound of these words arriving in your awareness. This is it. There is nothing else to find. And so the practice becomes simple, though not always easy. You can ask yourself today, who is the one trying to walk this path? Not as a riddle to solve with thinking, not as a question to answer with words, but as a way of looking directly at what is here. When you notice effort, look for the one who is efforting. When you notice doubt, look for the one who doubts. When you notice the thought, I am not doing this right, pause and look for the I that is failing. What you will find, if you look without rushing, is that the sense of self is also part of the river. It arises, it has a texture, a feeling, a location in the body perhaps, and then it shifts. It is not solid, it is not separate from the flow of experience. The one who walks and the path being walked are not two different things. They appear together. They dissolve together. This does not mean you disappear, it means the suffering that comes from clinging to a fixed self begins to loosen. You can still move through your day. You can still make choices, feel care, respond to what arises. But the heaviness of carrying a self from moment to moment starts to ease. The river flows without needing to hold each drop in place. So when you notice today that you are trying hard or feeling lost or wondering if you are on the right path, let that be the moment you pause. Let the question come, who is the one asking? Do not search for an answer, just look, just feel. Let the question open a space where the doing and the doer are seen as part of the same movement. The path appears when you walk. And the walking is nothing more than this breath, this step, this moment of awareness, meeting what is here. No one is walking, only walking is happening, and in that seeing, something quiet remains. The path begins with your own suffering. That is not a flaw in your practice. It is where awareness first opens. You feel the tightness in your chest, the weight of worry, the way certain thoughts return again and again like waves. You want relief. This wanting is honest. It is human. The Buddha did not teach freedom as an abstraction. He taught it because beings suffer and suffering can end. But something subtle happens as you walk this path. You begin to practice for yourself. You meditate to calm your own mind. You observe your breath to settle your own restlessness. You work with your anger, your fear, your confusion. And this is right work. It is necessary. But if you stop there, you are walking only half the path. The fourth noble truth offers the way out of suffering. It is not a set of rules, it is a living practice. And the practice includes this: freedom is not a private possession. It does not belong to you alone. When you light a candle and use that flame to light another, the first candle loses nothing. Its light continues. The second candle now burns just as brightly. This is how compassion works. Your freedom and the freedom of others are not in competition. They are the same light. You may have been taught that spiritual practice is personal, that you must save yourself first, that your own liberation comes before anything else. And there is a grain of truth in this. You cannot give what you do not have. But the teaching can be misunderstood. It can become a reason to turn inward and stay there, to build a quiet life and call it enlightenment, to feel peaceful while the world continues to ache. The Mahayana tradition sees this clearly. It says, "May I be free from suffering, and may all beings be free." There is no separation between these two wishes. When you sit in meditation and feel your breath settle, you are not just calming your own nervous system, you are learning what peace feels like. And once you know it in your own body, you can recognize it as a possibility for everyone. The person sitting next to you on the bus, the stranger who cut you off in traffic, the friend who hurt you, the people you will never meet. They all want what you want. They all seek relief from their own tightness, their own fear. This is not an idea to believe, it is something to feel. And you begin to feel it when you stop treating your practice as a personal project, when you stop measuring your progress as if it were yours alone. Try this. Today, choose one person. It does not need to be someone you love. It does not need to be someone you even like. Just one person who crosses your path. In the silence of your own mind, wish for them what you wish for yourself. Not in grand language, not as a formal prayer, just a quiet thought. May you be free from this. May you know peace. You do not need to say it aloud. You do not need to tell them. This is not about them receiving anything from you. It is about you noticing that your wish for peace can extend beyond your own skin. When you do this, something shifts. The boundary you thought was solid becomes porous. You see that the same breath moving through you is moving through them. The same awareness that notices your suffering can notice theirs. The candle you have been tending so carefully can light another without losing its flame. And in that moment, the path stops being about personal gain. It becomes about something larger. This does not mean you abandon your own practice. You still sit, you still observe, you still work with what arises in your own mind. But the context changes. You are not practicing to become someone special. You are practicing because freedom is possible, and it is possible for everyone. Your own clarity becomes a gift, not because you give it away, but because clarity itself is never isolated. It spreads the way light spreads. You may find that this makes the practice easier. When you wish peace for another person, even silently, your own heart softens. The tightness you were carrying loosens. This is not a technique. It is just what happens when compassion is present. The flame that lights another candle burns more steadily, not less. And over time, this becomes natural. You stop thinking of compassion as something you must generate. It is simply what awareness does when it is not caught in the illusion of separation. You see someone struggling, and the wish for their freedom arises on its own. Not because you are virtuous, not because you are trying to be good, but because you have walked the path long enough to know that their suffering and your suffering are not different things. You've been walking this path for a while now. Maybe you've been meditating, reading, trying to live more gently. And somewhere inside, there's a quiet question: when will I arrive? When will this practice finally take me somewhere different, somewhere better, somewhere free? The Buddha spoke of a path between extremes, not the path of indulgence, not the path of harsh denial, a middle way. But we often miss what he meant by path. We imagine it like a road through the desert, leading from suffering here to peace over there. We think if we just walk long enough, carefully enough, we reach the place where everything changes. A circle drawn in sand has no beginning and no end. You can start anywhere along its curve. Every point is both arrival and departure. The circle doesn't lead somewhere, it reveals something. This is the fourth noble truth, though we rarely hear it this way. We're told there is a path, and we assume that means peace waits at the end of it. But the teaching is quieter than that. There is no way to peace. Peace is the way, not peace as a destination. Peace as the quality of how you move. You can feel this in your body right now. Notice your breathing. It doesn't arrive anywhere. Each breath is complete. The inhale doesn't become the exhale by traveling a distance. It simply changes, and the change itself is whole. When you walk slowly, really slowly, feeling each step, something shifts. The foot lifts, the weight transfers, the foot meets the ground again. None of these moments is trying to become the next. Each one is full. The step doesn't think, I must get to the next step. It simply is what it is, and then it isn't, and something else arises. This is the path the Buddha described. Not a journey toward awakening, but awakening expressed as movement. We miss this because we've been taught that effort means striving toward, that practice means progress, that the spiritual life is about becoming someone wiser, kinder, more free than who we are right now. And so we practice with a subtle violence. We meditate to get somewhere. We cultivate compassion to improve ourselves. We watch our breath to finally arrive. The circle drawn in sand doesn't improve as you trace it. It's already complete. Equanimity lives here, in this understanding. Not the equanimity of indifference, but the equanimity of seeing clearly. When you know that this moment isn't a stepping stone to the next, you stop leaning forward, you stop bracing. The heart settles. You might try this today or tomorrow or whenever the impulse arises. Walk slowly for 5 minutes. Not as an exercise to get better at walking, not as a technique to achieve calm. Just walk and feel each step as both journey and destination. Let the foot lift without trying to get anywhere. Let it fall without accomplishment. You'll notice the mind wants to rush. It will say, yes, I'm walking mindfully. Now what? It will try to turn even this into a path towards something else. That's all right. The mind has been trained to seek. But you can notice the seeking without following it. You can feel the foot on the ground, the weight, the texture, the small adjustment of balance, and let that be enough. This isn't about perfecting your walk. It's about recognizing that the walk is already perfect, in the sense that it's complete. Nothing is missing. The step doesn't need to become something other than a step to have value. When you sit in meditation and the breath feels ordinary, unremarkable, maybe even boring, that's the circle revealing itself. The breath isn't trying to impress you. It isn't building toward a peak experience. It's just breathing fully in this moment, and then this one, and then this one. Peace isn't the feeling you'll have once you've walked far enough. Peace is the willingness to be here in this step without needing it to lead anywhere. The teaching doesn't ask you to stop moving. It asks you to stop dividing your life into the part that's practice and the part that's arrival. Every moment you meet with awareness is both. The path and the destination are the same thing, seen clearly. Your foot touches the ground. The earth receives it. Nothing more is needed. We've walked through these 8 folds together, and perhaps you've noticed something. The path doesn't ask you to become someone else. It doesn't require you to fix yourself first, to reach some threshold of worthiness before you begin. The path simply invites you to see clearly what is already here, and to respond with care. This is the middle way. Not because it splits the difference between 2 extremes, but because it moves beneath the whole framework of too much and too little, of grasping and pushing away. When you walk this path, you're not measuring yourself against an ideal. You're learning to meet each moment as it actually is. The breath comes in, the breath goes out. Between these 2 movements there is no destination to reach, and yet something shifts, attention steadies. The mind grows quieter, compassion finds room to move. You might sit down to practice and find the mind scattered, restless, caught in old loops. This is not failure. This is simply what's here. The path doesn't demand perfect concentration. It asks only that you notice the scattering, that you feel the restlessness in the body, that you see the loop for what it is. And then, gently, you return. You place attention back on the breath, back on the body, back on this moment. This returning is the practice, not the arriving, but the coming back. Again and again, with patience, without harshness. The path is made of these small gestures of kindness toward your own experience. Sometimes the mind will grow still and spacious. Thoughts will settle like sediment in water, and you'll rest in a clarity that asks for nothing. These moments are a gift. They show you what's possible, but they are not the go. The go, if we can even call it that, is to meet all of it with the same steady awareness, the clarity and the confusion, the ease and the struggle, the joy and the sorrow. Because suffering doesn't end by avoiding half of life. It ends by seeing the whole of it clearly, by understanding how craving weaves itself through every corner of experience, and by learning to loosen that grip, breath by breath, choice by choice. The Eightfold Path is not 8 separate practices. It's one movement expressed 8 ways. Right view illuminates right intention. Right intention shapes right speech. Right speech supports right action. Each fold supports the others, and together they create a way of living that reduces harm and deepens peace. You don't have to walk all 8 perfectly. You don't have to master one before touching another. You simply begin where you are. Maybe today it's noticing the quality of your speech. Maybe tomorrow it's feeling the body as you move through your day. Maybe next week it's sitting quietly for 10 minutes and watching the breath. Each step is complete in itself. Each step is also part of the whole. The Buddha called this path noble, not because it's reserved for saints, but because it leads toward freedom. And freedom in this context doesn't mean escaping your life. It means meeting your life so fully, so clearly, that you're no longer driven by the invisible forces of craving and aversion. You see them arise, you feel them in the body, and you choose again and again not to be ruled by them. This is quiet work. It doesn't announce itself. There are no dramatic breakthroughs, no sudden arrivals, just a gradual softening, a growing capacity to be with what is, a deepening trust that you don't need to control everything, that you can let experience move through you without clinging or pushing away. The path is always here. It doesn't disappear when you forget it. It doesn't abandon you when you stumble. It simply waits, patient and steady, for you to return. If you'd like to continue exploring these teachings, there are other reflections waiting for you. No urgency. They'll be here when you're ready. For now, let yourself rest with this question, not to answer it, but simply to hold it lightly as you move back into your day. What would it feel like to walk through the next hour of your life without needing anything to be different than it is?